Tim Kahn with us from Sandler Kahn. And we're going to be going through their eBanking suite of products for Dynamics SL. So many of you, I'd like to introduce myself. You may or may not know me. My name is Stephen Molka. I'm one of the partners, founding partners of SIS. Some of you have been working with for over 20 years with SL. Others that may not have worked with us in the past, welcome to our education series. Glad that you could join us today. The objective of the education series is we try to do every 45 or 60 days, basically giving back to the community, understanding what the different product sets are and different things coming up. We'll have some more of them coming up for year-end closing and those type of activities. So a little bit about SIS as an organization. We've been working with Dynamics SL now for well over 25 years, back in the old days when it was the Solomon 3 product. Done a lot in organizations or with organizations around implementations of solutions, customization of solutions, supporting our customer base, and really trying to optimize how Dynamics SL can return value and improve your business processes within the organization. So again, like to thank you all for attending. A couple of key things, and sometimes customers, they work with us with the Dynamics SL solution, everything else, but don't realize are many different things that we do across the product line. So within the Microsoft product lines itself, we work in the Dynamics 365 product solution, the Dynamics SL product solution, also working within customizations, custom development, SharePoint, the Office 365 suite of products, and other Microsoft related items such as Microsoft projects. So many of the things around providing solutions around the Microsoft framework, that's what we're working on. And then today, the Sandler Kahn suite of products, and we've been working with basically Tim for well over 15 years. These are the products that when you go through and people think of, normally Positive Pay as the one product that they've worked with, but there's a whole suite of products, and Tim is going to introduce those to us today that go beyond just the Positive Pay or EFT, that as you look at dealing with the dollars and the cash and the banking activity around Dynamics SL, how these products can go through and help optimize those areas. So instead of me talking, I'd again like to thank everybody for their attendance today. I want to turn this over to Tim, and let's get in and look at how they can help us. So thank you, Tim.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Steve. Nice to be with you all this afternoon. We've got quite a bit to cover, but I do want to give you a little background on our company. As Steve mentioned, we've been involved, along with himself, for well over 20 years with Microsoft Dynamics SL. So we're a certified ISV. We'll have over 1,500 customers using our solution. By far, the majority of those are on the SL platform. About 6 years ago, we got involved with the AX platform, but most of those, over 1,200 plus, are on Dynamics SL. And we work with partners all over the globe, and the SIS group has been one of those first partners we dealt with back in the 90s as well. We have extensive bank formats if you have any requirements that go outside of the U.S. Of course, we'll talk about USACH. We've also been honored with the President's Club Award for Microsoft, given the top 5% of Microsoft partners for the past 12 straight years. And then this past summer at the Inner Circle, at the Inspire conference in Washington, we were honored with the Inner Circle Award from Microsoft, given to the top 1% of partners. So a long history with Microsoft, with Dynamics SL, and our partners and our customers. So as Steve mentioned, we have different modules that are in the eBanking suite. We're going to touch on each of these and see a demo of them. The first three there, Positive Pay, AP, EFT, and Wire Transfer, deal on the AP side of the house. Just about everyone we work with, of course, has accounts payable, making payments. On a lesser scale, on the AR side, that we do supply an AR EFT, does a direct debit type of transaction, just the opposite of the AP side. And then we also have a Lockbox Processing product as well. If you're either getting a traditional lockbox, getting checks in through that, or you're keying in just into a spreadsheet, maybe some of your customer receipt information, and then we can automate that process of settling and creating an SL payment batch. So let's get started, take a look at what we have in terms of Positive Pay. So those of you that do print checks just may be aware that the checks are by far the most prevalent use of fraud by the bad guys. And we would think over time that the fraudulent use would go down as people use checks less, but we've actually found that recently it's popped up a little bit. One reason we've heard is that people like checks because actually there's a little concern about electronic payments being a little less secure with breaches, etc. However, depending on how you manage your electronic payments, they should be just fine. But so the trend is interesting that checks aren't going away anytime soon, and positive pay is a great mechanism to prevent any kind of fraud against that. So again, check fraud, again, when you're doing positive pay, bank formats are critical. We provide those to you at no charge. So if you have a bank today, we'll have that format likely in our library. If you don't, we'll produce it for you. No programming on your part. Hundreds of those are available that we've accumulated over the years. The positive pay protects AP and payroll checks, handles multi-account, multi-company. So if you have multiple bank accounts, we can send one file that accommodate all of those. The transmission of the file to the bank is through a browser, or we can connect it to an FTP session to upload to the bank. And then we archive those files as well. So it's a kind of a full-blown solution for you, and security in terms of where the files are. Let me just jump over and we'll take a look at the application. Let's see here, where is that? That's down at the bottom here. Okay. So what we're seeing here is Dynamics SL 2015. Some of you on older versions, SL 2011, and even those on SL 7, we support all those versions. Actually, going back to where Steve and I started, we had versions well before that as well, but we're supporting SL 7 going forward. So as you can see, the first thing I want you to note is that the application is part and parcel of your SL application. So you're all familiar with the menu options, but when you install our solution, you find it right here along with everything else. So all the user interface, the access, and all of that is just very straightforward. You're going to understand how to use it immediately. We have many employees that we hear about that are working with a company, and they maybe came on after eBanking Suite was installed. They would think that Microsoft provided the solution because it looks and feels and acts just like a Microsoft developed module. So in terms of positive pay, like I mentioned, file formats are kind of a critical piece of that, and we'll just give you a sampling here of some of the formats. This particular screen won't have every single format that we've developed. We have formats that come on all the time, and then we can provide them to you just with a simple job. You bring them in, but as you can see, hundreds and hundreds of formats for banks all over the US and Canada. So again, you just pop these in there and you're ready to go, set them up, configure them with a bank account, and then process away. And the process is very straightforward. It's under the menu option, create and send files. And it's from here that we'll also do our AP transmissions that we'll talk about here in a minute. But before we get there, let's take a look at how this works. So what we have is a screen that has both our EFT and our positive pay transmissions. The way it works is that the files, we have a history here of all the files that have gone out the door, and they're affiliated with the AP or the payroll batch, the SL batch. So here I have one that I've already sent. This was a PNC payee. The way I organize it is I go to new eBanking file, and that would allow me to select from all my SL batches. I can just pick them off, and as long as they belong to the same format, of course, I can collect them together. I've got one here that I already did before, and I'm just going to resend it. So we do allow you to resend files because sometimes you send it to the bank and they'll call you and say, oops, we don't have it, can you resend it? So it's as simple as checking it off, selecting the option to create and send, and then hit begin processing. It's warning me that it's already been sent, but so this is going to go and actually generate the file. It's going to write it to a predetermined location that you've set on your network, so it's now saved for you for historical purposes, and then it's going to go off and generate. In this case, I believe it's set up to launch a browser session, which will launch, in this case, I believe it's the PNC website. So how this would work is you'd get the browser session would open up, you'd log into the browser, into the website, and then upload the positive pay file. And that's really all there is to it, to the positive pay side of it. Looks like my browser's having a little delay coming up. I imagine when we come back for the next demo that will show. So also here you can get details. You can see those particular checks that are in the file, clicking the details button. It looks like I'm getting kind of slowed up here by some other process. So I'm just going to put this away for a minute, and we'll come back to the presentation. So that's Positive Pay in a nutshell. You'll see I'll reference it again when we get to the APFT as well. So jumping over to the next module, again, this is the APFT sending files out the door. And what this supports is the full standard US NACHA format. So it's one of our formats that we have amongst all our formats, and it supports the standard functionality you would expect. A little more technically, there's called a PPD, or prearranged payment or deposit, that's used for paying individuals. Those might be your salespeople or any individual person. CCD is for corporate payments, for your trade pays, etc. We also support CCD Plus, which allows for an addenda record. And then we also have tax payments and a couple other things as well. So if you're working with sending checks out today, you may want to investigate switching over to electronic payments. So this is an example of one of our customers that did that analysis, and they determined because they don't have to print the checks, they don't have to stuff the checks, they don't have to mail the checks, they don't have to deal with returns or checks that never arrived, whatever. They found that the 3-year savings of almost $200,000 by using an EFT type process. So if it's something you're interested in, you'll see that it's very very integrated, very automated within the solution, and it can really be a money saver. So as I was mentioning, PPD and CCD, CCD Plus again adds an additional addenda record for those a little more technical, and IAT is for an international ACH transaction. So that came into being a few years ago, where you could actually send an ACH transaction and it would ship to a cross-border type activity. Again, ACHs are much cheaper than wires. Most of you probably are aware, in the 10 or 15 cent range per transaction, where of course wires are in the $20 or $30 transaction. In addition, we support federal and state tax payments. One of our customers pays hundreds of state taxes. They're taxing agency or taxing collection agency, and they use this to pay their federal and state taxes through the ACH. Also, child support payments are also supported. It's a type of a CCD plus. In addition to the files going to the bank that do the actual credits or debits, we also have a very robust email remittance advice solution. We allow attachments to those, so you can have an email that sends out, and in the body of the email it lists all the invoices that are being paid, or you can say I want to do an attachment, attach a CSV file. We provide out-of-the-box templates, but you can customize them if you want to have it actually look and feel exactly how you want it to be. Here's an example of what one might look like.
Up for shipped across the border.
Might look like out the door, and this would be a payment, a particular payment here, and then this is the invoice that it's paying. Here's another payment, and a couple of invoices are being paid. So this is all very configurable and works right out of the box. Just set up and reference the particular format. We also have an interesting concept, the manual check workflow. So right now, if you're doing ACHs, I imagine you're going to your bank, making an ACH payment either against a template or a transit routing account number, enter it and make the payment. Then you come back into SL and you'll create a manual check batch, likely. You'll tag it as electronic payment if you're in 2015. And then you'll just record that same information as a manual check and then release it. So we really take all the steps away from that. We actually have the banking details that are in SL, and then when we generate our payment selection, we end up driving it into a manual check batch automatically. So now you've got a manual check batch sitting there with all your electronic payments that's on hold. And then what happens is when you go and actually send the file to the bank, that process will automatically release that batch. So there's no more of that double entry on the bank site and or back into SL, and there's no requirement to send it through the check printing process. Some people still do that, and we do have that option available if need be. We've added so that you can have actually multiple bank accounts per vendor. So we've had some companies that have different contracts, so they'll have a vendor and they want them paid on different contracts to different accounts, banking accounts. So different transit routing and account number by contract. We have something called account change security. So if many years ago we had some fraud committed, one of our customers actually changed the transit routing and account number just prior to a file going to the bank and paid themselves a pretty good sum of money. They ended up in jail, so it didn't do them much good. But we have an account change security to say if the transit routing and account number is modified, then someone from another security group that you've set up, a set of security folks, they would have to approve that change before we'll allow the file to be sent out the door. So a very nice security feature. Also, amount security is available, and we have an option to say if certain levels of dollars are going out the door, different people with their passwords have to log in and secure that to make sure that large amounts don't go out. It basically replaces the need for multiple signers that you have on your checks, or it's used for the electronic side of the house. Again, the files go out the door through a browser or an FTP upload. Either of those are supported, just like with Positive Pay. So I'm going to walk through a demo, the demo steps of this, but I just want to walk through kind of the formula of how this works. So voucher entry is done in SL just as you normally would expect. You'll see this in a minute. And then the next step, as you all are aware, the next step is do your payment selection. So say on Tuesday you're paying 500 vouchers. You come into payment selection and select your 500 vouchers. Now when you put in APFT, you're saying 200 of my vouchers are actually going to be ACHs and 300 are going to be my SL checks. So now I need to, what do? I've got a payment selection batch with 500, but what I need is 2. So we have what's called the payment selection filter. And this is part of our module, and you just add it to your process. So you run this SL batch of 500 through the filter, and it actually breaks it into 2 batches. So you have a batch of 300 checks and a batch of 200 ACHs. So now they're nicely separated, and now we can process the checks separately from the ACHs. The final step is back in eBanking, and we do just much like we did with Positive Pay. We can go create and send a file to the bank, and it's only going to take those 200 ACH transactions and send those to the bank, whereas your checks, your 300 checks, are going to go through the normal check printing process that you've been used to. So let's take a look at the screen here. It looks like my screen still might be a little bit hung. Is it there? Let me get rid of it here. I don't know why my browser didn't open, so I'll just close this off here. See if I can get rid of it. Must be something with my browser not correctly closing or opening up for this. So let me get rid of this item here. It should be available now. Okay, so let's come back. So we're going to walk through the process that I just kind of mentioned. So prior to the demo, I created an AP batch. Voucher adjustment batch. And one thing I want to show you here is how you determine whether a voucher is going to be paid one way or another. My screen will open up. So this is your standard voucher adjustment screen. You will know it's customized. We added a small bit of VBA custom code to allow for what I'm going to show you next. So here's Kim Embercombrey, and she is set up to be paying by PPD. So what we have, I'll show you later, the vendor banking details say that by default she gets paid by PPD, which is a pre-approved payment or deposit, and that would be an ACH transaction. In this same voucher batch, I've got another vendor, Mike, and he's being paid by SL check. So again, we add these fields to allow you to select either by default and or you can change it depending on how your setup is, that how this voucher would be paid. So most people set up vendors that would always be paid by ACH, others would be all or wire or SL check, and this would all just happen naturally. You'd enter it, it would automatically default in, and your operators here don't have to worry about it. Many SL customers import their vouchers electronically from other systems. Again, it's all set up to automatically default to the appropriate method of payment. So the next step, as we know, is to do select documents for payment and the payment selection. So I'm going to come in here and do that as well. And that will create, of course, you know, in my analogy, it was 500. In this case, we're just going to have 2. But this is my payment batch for the day. So I'm going to pick that 250 and 251 are my 2 vouchers I'm selecting for payment. So remember, one of these is for an ACH and one is for a check. So what this does is create your payment batch. Just you can do it through payment selection or edit select in either case. So now we have a batch that's got 2 items, but they need to be split into the 2 batches. So in the eBanking suite, as I mentioned, we have a payment selection filter. And this filter's job is to break that batch into 2 sections, one with all the ACHs in one batch and one with the other. So when I select this, it's going to process through. And you see what it did here. It automatically said, okay, I've got 1 SL computer check, and that's going to end up in the check workflow is going to go through my checks. And I've got 1 format US ACH, and I'm going to create a manual check batch with that. And you'll notice that the 402 is the batch that I started with. When I hit begin processing, we're going to create a batch 403. So again, this is going through and breaking the original batch into 2 pieces, and now we're going to have another batch. In the 403 one, we're going to drive through as a manual check batch. 402, you just run it through your check printing, and you'd have all your computer checks. You'd run your computer check numbering system, whatever. But this particular batch here is now a manual batch, and it was automatically created by this screen, which is way cool because now you have a batch waiting to be released, and it's got all the information you need, no double entry required, and it's on hold. So it's on hold until we say we've sent it to the bank. So we've marked it as electronic payment. We can actually have a different numbering scheme than our checks. We can actually put an alpha character in the beginning of the number as well. So we have a lot of capabilities to make this really a great process. So that's that extra step we add in there, and now we go to create and send. And this is very similar to the positive pay, virtually identical, except that we have a different tab on the screen. Some of you may ask, well, what about security? Do I want my people sending my positive pay files being the same ones that are allowing for electronic payments? We have a security set up that you can distinguish that one tab is available to one set of users and one tab is available to another. But just like positive pay, I just say new eBanking file. It's going to list me all my batches. This is the one that we just created, that 403. It's already checked for me and accepted. So I just accept it. It's now ready to go. This is already create and send, and I hit one more button. So that you can see how easy that is. Once you get that filter piece done, then what we've done is now we're creating the file and sending it off to the bank. In this case, I think here we go. So it just needed to prime the pump, but I guess I understood apparently there was some connection. It was trying to go to PNC Bank, and what it was going to do was automatically log us into the website. Not automatically log us, but we would manually log into the website, upload our file, and then the file would be processed. Once we close this, we're going to get an option called keep or delete, just like in your check printing, where you have an option to keep or delete checks. You're going to get the same option here, and what this allows you to do is say, yep, that was successfully sent, and then I want to release my manual check batch, and then also I want to send email. So I've got an option to complete now or complete later. I'm going to keep now, and this now says the following check batch, that 403, was included in the file ready to be released, and we're going to say yes. We have an option to do this automatically. So it's going to go and release that batch 403. So now that's posted to the general ledger, the AP, it's all settled, and we now are also doing some cleanup here, and then we're also going to attempt to send our emails. So what we did, apparently this particular vendor didn't have any emails, or maybe we didn't have it configured correctly. I'd have to check, but it would give you the status here. You can go and see a log to see what emails succeeded or failed. You can resend them and all of that as well. So this process of completing does that whole process end to end. So here's that one that I just created. It showed me that my emails were kept but not sent. And so this was a case where maybe my SMTP server is not set up correctly. So I could select this again, and actually I can go and say send emails only. So this would allow me to resend things that didn't occur. In addition, I've got a details thing that I didn't show you in Positive Pay, but it's very much identical. This shows you the checks that, or the records in the manual check batch here. You can actually see the ACH file. This has got block fill filled in and a header piece as well. But this shows you the whole process end to end from voucher entry on through to creating the file, or creating the manual check, the payment selection, doing the filter, and then sending the file to the bank. And one last thing I want to show you in the APFT area is our vendor banking details, because the next question would be, well, where do you get all that information to put into that notcha file to send to the bank? So what we do is we leverage off your standard vendor master. So this is a lookup of all your vendors in your whole system, and you simply select those that you want to include in the banking, the automated banking. So here's that Kim record that I've got here. So Kim is set up as the USACH format, and then these are the different entry classes that you're going to support for her, and that's the default. We have an option here that says can change in voucher entry. What that means is that when someone's entering a voucher, if that's checked, they could modify and say, I want to pay Kim by computer check, this particular run. If it's unchecked, then it means it's locked down, and therefore the voucher entry operator really has to abide by whoever manages this screen. This is where we enter bank transit and account number. So this is where the transit routing, and whether it's a checking account or savings account. This is where we handle that account approval I spoke about before. On this screen, you'd also have the various email setup that you want, who gets notified, who gets the remittance information, is there a custom message or an attachment, etc. So a lot of great functionality here in terms of providing what you need in order to not only create the file, but then send their email remittances as well. So that's an overview of the APFT and a run through of it. Let's jump back over here into the setup, to the demo. Okay, so let me circle back, go to the previous actually, and jump back to the main menu. So just to highlight where we've been. So we've talked about Positive Pay, sending files to the bank, and we've talked about AP funds transfer. Just a reminder, this is for US NACHA only. So now we're going to jump to Wire Transfer Plus. So what is this? So this is, again, sending any kind of a file to make payments out of AP that's not ACH, okay? So you might have wires that you want to send. Maybe you want to send outsourced check printing, which is where you send a file to your bank and they print your checks for you. That can be done through Wire Transfer Plus. Or what about P cards? What if you want to pay off of a credit card? Many banks provide a service now where you can send a file to the bank. They will have actually either they generate a temporary credit card or have a credit card there. They will pay your vendors off the credit card, and you actually get a spiff at the end of the year because it's paid off of a credit card. So all of those kind of functions can be done through the Wire Transfer Plus. It includes bank communications, just as we talk about, and the same kind of robust email notification functionality as well. And in terms of formats, there are tens and tens of these formats. They're quite a bit more complicated than Positive Pay formats, but we have a very nice library full of them. Certainly most of the U.S. banks. We do have a lot of banks. You can see here we've got banks in looks like Belgium. We've got here in Canada. We've got Germany, France, Ireland, all around the world, Japan, UK, etc. And within the bank formats, there are many different transaction types. So this is, I'm looking at a BAF, a Bank of America flat file. This provides, you can send actually ACH transactions inside the file. You can send tax payments. You can send employee checks. You can send wires. All can be included in one file. So with our system, you have that capability as well to set up a vendor to use the Wire Transfer Plus, and using a format can make all kinds of payments to all kinds of vendors. So what are the key points here? The process flow is absolutely identical to APFT. So we'll walk through that here in a second, but we'll see how that's the same. If you're doing wires, instead of being processed by the NACHA folks, it'll be processed by the Federal Reserve. As some of you may be aware, FinTech is moving forward with same-day ACH, faster payments, etc. And actually, eventually, the Federal Reserve may become more moot in this because people will be not requiring the use of wires for same-day settlement. However, as you may know, if you process a wire, it costs more today, and it generally can be settled by the clearinghouses within about 6 hours. With APFT, if you're doing next day ACH, it's the next day. Same day ACH is generally it's going to clear that evening. So there are different options available to you. Again, exactly like APFT, we have email remittance advice and attachments. Can be customized, all identical. The formats are absolutely plug-in. So we do formats all the time. If we create a format, we just run a SQL script that's now in the system and you're ready to use it. As I mentioned, all different kinds of transaction types are possible depending what your requirements are. Just as with APFT, you can have multiple bank accounts per vendor. So a vendor can have multiple banking affiliations and want their money sent to different banks. Account change security, as we mentioned, the same as before. Account approval, browser FTP uploads as well. Let's go take a look and what's the difference with what we have here with Wire Transfer Plus. So within the same set of module areas, again, file formats, I showed that in the slide, but again, it's in the same screen. There's just a different tab for it where you can get, these are all your Wire Transfer Plus formats here. Again, tens and tens of these. Again, we have a library, so not every one is in here, but we provide them to you as needed if it's not, it comes out of the box for you. So the main difference with Wire Transfer Plus is the banking entry screen. So as we saw before with Kim was set up as an ACH type vendor. But what we'll look here is we've got someone else, Jay, is set up as Wells Fargo Payment Manager Service. So I come in here and that's the format, and Jay tends to get a foreign currency wire regularly. However, he could get a corporate exchange as well, or USD wire if he has a different account. We could organize that. If you can change it, let's see, that it doesn't look like there's anything different set up here. Let me get another one that's maybe got a little more illustrative. Not doing that. Let me go back and get another vendor. Okay, so here's Terry Atkinson. This is a Fed wire. Again, you can enter the transit routing, but you'll notice some new fields are available. So now we have this could be an ABA number, it could be a CHIPS number, we can do a SWIFT, an IBAN number, again, when you get into more foreign payments. The email piece is identical, so this is the remittance going off to your vendors. Now, but we add additional screens that have additional information. When you're sending wires, typically there may need to be the beneficiary name and address. We can pull that directly from your vendor master. The vendor remittance name and address, or you can key it uniquely for this particular setup. Sometimes a beneficiary bank is needed. So not only the beneficiary itself, but what's the bank that it's going to. Then in other cases, there are intermediary banks that are needed. So maybe you're sending a wire to Northern Scotland. It has to go to Lloyd's of London first as the intermediary bank, but the final bank might be RBC and RBS in Scotland. To the benefit of, maybe you have to do a credit party, maybe you're doing an investment and it's to the credit of someone else. And then bank instructions or payment instructions can be added. These are pieces of information that when you're sending a wire may be needed well and above what's for US ACH. So once you've established these setups, the process is absolutely identical to the voucher entry we saw before. So I'm going to open up that individual in voucher entry, you'll just see how it looks a little bit different. But once you enter the voucher and record how that individual is going to be paid, or the corporate entity, the rest of the process is exactly identical to the ACH process. So I pick Teresa, and so what we can see here, they're going to be paid by FedWire. You saw how it automatically defaulted in, but I've given an option that she also could be paid by commercial check, CCD, etc. So these are all just options that are available, set up in vendor banking details, vendor banking entry, and then this process just rolls forward. Create your vouchers, create your payment selection batch, do the payment selection filter, and then send the files to the bank. Let me take a look and see if I've got a sample one that's for wire here. So if I come into create and send, so you can see here we've got different formats. This is an eCash format. Here's Stanbic Bank. Here's Chase single user account that's paying off of a credit card. You can see here we've got the same organization, and then the details we can drill in and take a look. And actually, this then is how this particular file looks like. But again, once you learn how to use the ACH or the Wire Transfer Plus, the other side of it, virtually identical. Just a matter of setting up your vendor banking details, making sure you have the correct file format that's needed. Okay, let's come back. So that covers the AP side of the house, positive pay, APFT for NACHA, wire transfer for everything other than NACHA. So let's go to the AR side where we have AR, electronic funds transfer. So this is exactly the mirror image of the AP side. It's used to collect from customers. So you have your invoices that are set up, and this is going to go and use a NACHA file in order to retrieve money from your customers. This is the same process that's used by either your car payment or your mortgage, where you set up what's called the direct debit, or we call it AREFT, which will actually pull money from your account based on your authorization. Again, we support PPD and CCD and ACH. The way we designate what what customers' invoices we're going to collect against is based on a terms code, and that does the EF collection. Invoices are auto-selected for us as we go in. I'll show that in a second. And we generate a payment application batch when we're done. Not only do we send the file to the bank to actually have the money debited out of their account and deposited into your account, we'll create a payment application batch to apply that payment against those invoices. We have the exact same kind of email remittance advice setup. Of course, this now we're saying on this date we pulled money from your account rather than we just deposited money in your account. Again, browser and FTP uploads. Let's take a look the difference there and why, how this differs. So we have a customer banking entry where, again, for your customers, you set up the banking details. It's virtually a mirror of the vendor banking details. But then on the AR side, we have AR create and send and receive file. So this is just kind of a mirror process. But again, we're going to generate a file, and the file is going to have information about your invoices that we want to collect. And it will send a file to the bank and pull that money from your customers' bank accounts. So I have a one here that's available, so I can drill in and see the files that are there. So in this case, these are the particular invoice batches, and then we have another additional screen where we can select and view the invoices that are in that invoice batch, and then based on the terms code, we'll know which ones to select. So it's a matter of many options here in order to select what are this terms code begins with EF, we're saying electronic funds, and this now is going to select this particular invoice to be collected to be paid through the process. Once we've done that setup and selected it, and I've got one here, then this is the identical process. We have the details. It basically shows these are the invoices we're collecting against, and then this is the file detail. The difference is, of course, this is now going to be a pull money from the School of Fine Art rather than push money to the School of Fine Art, and it's going to then deposit the money in your account rather than pull the money out of your account. So it's just that mirror detail. So it's in this screen that you actually go and select the invoices that you're going to collect against, and then at the end of the process, like I said, once you do that complete process and send the emails, there's an option automatically, though, it'll go and do a payment batch create the payment batch and post the payment batch to settle those invoices against that payment. Again, we find it less used. It depends on your business whether that's a particular feature that that's useful to you. Some businesses it works great. If you can always get so that you can collect money in your own timeline against your customers, it's perfect. It's not necessarily, though, every company can do that. And then the final module we're going to talk about is Lockbox Processing. So this is used for a traditional lockbox, which is, of course, is where you have your checks mailed to a post office box. It's not necessarily your post office box. It's one where your bank has access to it. So they'll go there daily or twice a week and get any checks that are there, and they'll take them back to the bank. They'll open them all up. They'll make the deposit for you, and they'll capture either an image or create a file for you that has the details of those remittances. And so what we can do is take that file from the bank and run it through our lockbox. And the goal, of course, is to apply those payments against invoices that exist in SL and do, again, a payment application batch. If you don't have a traditional lockbox, and maybe some of you are using remote deposit where you scan the checks and make the deposit that way, and if you can key into a spreadsheet just the invoice number and the invoice amount, you could use that as the driver into this system. As you know, in SL, you have to first identify a customer in order to make a payment. Of course, if you can just key in the invoice number, 2 or 3 fields down a list, hundreds of transactions, you can push that through this process. It'll automatically, of course, once it knows the invoice number, it knows the SL customer and handles that. It's good if you have high volume of cash receipts. If you get 10 checks a week, it probably would not be cost effective for the application. It does auto invoice application, as I mentioned. We send it through to a workbench to refine those settlements such that the settlements they may not be perfect. You may have some items that we can't figure out, and then we have some applications that can help you do that. It handles split payments automatically. So if you're getting checks in from a holding company that's paying from customers that belong to a different customer in your system. So maybe Walmart sends you a check, but you've got the Walmart stores and as different customers. It will automatically take that check and split it out accordingly based on the knowing that this invoice is being paid by a different customer. Handles discounts automatically and credit memos. It'll do the payment application against an existing credit memo. It handles, as I said, if you don't have a traditional lockbox, again, you can feed it with a simple CSV file that has a few pieces of information. The fixed field and comma delimited are available in terms of the layout types, and the BAI2 is a bank standard. We have support for, I think, the city and the Wells, but you can custom tweak it if you need to, if your bank's BAI2 file is slightly different. We handle centralized cash. So if you're getting money into collecting money into one company, but the invoices are from customers in other companies, then it'll automatically do the due to from using standard SL processes. Multi-currency and multi-company available. And let's jump over and take a look at a demo here. So this process is over here on the AR side as well, ARE settlement. Sorry, create and send is the name here. AR create and send. And that's over here on this next tab. So here are particular files we brought in order to retrieve them. You click this button here, and you can go out then to your network, select files that are there, and then simply bring them in. Checkoff file, I don't have any here. You just bring them in. It would automatically bring it into our workbench. So these are different workbench records, and then the details are below through the workbench option here. So this is where the transactions have come in. Our system has automatically determined about the customer. We can do that through customer name. We can determine the customers. We can do it through transit routing and account number. We can store that and then bring it in here. And then we also can do it, of course, on invoice number. If we have the invoice number in the file, then we automatically have everything else. From here, you can actually look and see the lockbox file record itself, so you can drill in and take a look at it and see what's there if you need more information. You can also drill down into the applications where we've applied the money to various invoices. Items down here are things that we couldn't figure out, but we can go and do lookups here. We can do a customer suggestion. We can go and pull a customer that we like. We can look up in the Lockbox file record and take a look and see if there's information here that we could use possibly. Maybe the invoice number is wrong. We could actually tweak it and modify the invoice number. We can make a change to it or do a lookup across all invoice numbers in the system. I thought that would be a lookup there. In any case, then we have other, once you've figured out and figured something out here, then you simply check it off if it's available. Can't be selected, it got some errors. But if it was available, you could check it off and then move it up to the payments grid at the top. So the goal is to have everything up here. The more that comes in here automatically, the better. And then the final step is to create an AR payment batch, payment application batch, and that will occur. I do want to show you some lookups we have, though, for this kind of research if you need to do it. We have an extensive lookup area here that allow you to actually look across all your open invoices. This would be by balance. I can expand it, and I can see it. I can set any number of kinds of views here. Customer name, I can do that. We can set up, you can create any different views that you like. And once you find the particular invoice, if you check it and then you return it, it will return that back as the selected one that you were looking up. So this is a real nice customer document lookup application that hangs off of Lockbox, allowing you to research and find the invoice numbers that you need in order to move them and process them into an AR payment batch. So that covers the modules that we're going to cover today. So again, just in review, Positive Pay handles your checks to prevent fraud. APFT handles your NACHA transactions. Wire Transfer Plus handles everything other than NACHA. So anything outsourced check printing, wires, paying off of a credit card, and then the two AR applications for direct debit or AREFT or Lockbox processing as well. So I think with that, let me go back to the previous. Go to my last slide here. So at this point, I just want to have one kind of wrap-up slide about terms of pricing and next steps. So this would be purchased through SIS, your SL reseller. We don't sell direct, we sell through your reseller. Our fine folks here at SIS would be glad to help you. The modules can be purchased a la carte, so you can get, you can get the Positive Pay if you want just by itself, very inexpensive. You can get APFT, you can get wire transfer, etc. We support, as I mentioned, 2015, CU1, CU2, CU3, 2011, FPs, etc., and version 7 as well. So it should cover most of you that are on the call in terms of what you have. So SKSoft is our website. If you want to come there to find more information, there are demo videos there, data sheets as well, in terms of getting more information. So that being said, I'll open it up for questions. I have about 10 minutes left here. If there are any questions that are there, if not, I see some are queued. But Debbie, do you have anything that you see there queued up at the moment?
Tim, I don't. If anyone has anything, please just enter them into the question box, and we'll read those off and get some answers for you. We'll also, if you think of something later, you can also send an email to me, and I'll be happy to get Tim to respond.
Yeah, one question we often hear, Debbie, is that you mentioned the idea that I mentioned the idea about leading the reference number on the outbound ACHs with a letter, and they mentioned that, well, I know when I'm doing my checks, I can only enter numeric values. That is true, that the checks have to be a numeric sequence, but because we're creating that manual check batch programmatically, we can fool Solomon or SL and put in a leading character like a W or an E. And the beauty of that is then throughout your system, you'll see that reference number, and you'll immediately know that was an electronic payment versus a payment by check. So that is one item I wanted to bring up that I've noted. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim.
Yep. So let's, if we don't have any particular questions, Debbie, you want to walk through the next couple of slides?
Oh, absolutely. I just wanted to send information to you, let you know about an upcoming webinar we're going to have this Tuesday. It's an educational webinar for Dynamics SL on tips and tricks for menu maintenance. We're going to be covering a wide variety of items during this and providing you some real good information to help you really optimize your Dynamics SL. Since the link won't do you much good because it's long, so if you could just shoot me an email, I'll send you out the link to the registration list, and happy to answer any questions if you have any about the upcoming webinar. But it'll be Tuesday, November the 14th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And Tim, if we go to the next slide. And very exciting, we would like to definitely hope that every one of you guys will be able to attend the Dynamics SL user group that's going to be held in St. Louis, Missouri. Registration details are going to be coming soon, and we also will have a special registration code to save you some money off the registration. This is a really exciting event for SL users, lots of education, training, networking, and a lot more information about the ISV products like you've seen from Sandler Con today. So with that being said, just let me know if you have any questions about the products you've seen on SK Global. We're happy to schedule a personalized demonstration for you and also give you some information about pricing. If you just give me a call, my number and my email are on the slide. Please take that down. And we certainly appreciate everyone joining us today. It was a great time, and I appreciate you, Tim, for taking time to be with all of these Dynamics SL users.
Thank you, Debbie. It was my pleasure, and hope everyone has a good afternoon.
Thank you.